Welcome into the Zoneheads podcast. Your host, Brandon Kravitz, here along with a special guest, an alumnus of this podcast feed, a day one Zonehead, Greg Rhodes. Welcome back to the feed.
What is up, man? No, I'm happy to be here. I love doing everything that you can with the Zonehead. So if I can be included, I'm in.
So if I can go back for a moment, because you've been interacting with the show in the zone, of course, 3 to 6. The chances are, if you're listening to this podcast, you're familiar with the afternoon show, but 3 to 6 p.m., 96.9 The Game, in case you're not. You've been interacting with the show for as long as I can remember, and I was thrust into that position back in 2019. When did you start listening to sports talk radio in Orlando? Did that predate the show?
Yeah, that probably predated the show. I remember you being on with Bianchi and things like that. So, yeah, no, it was a little bit before the show, I guess. I wasn't as invested in it until probably about 2019, though. That kind of timeline seems to link up pretty well. That seems to be about when I really kind of dove deep in and wanted to be a part of, like, the Orlando sports conversation, I guess, you know?
And that's what I find so fascinating about your journey is you and I become familiar with each other as I'm hosting a show and you're interacting with what we do and show up to some station events. And then you and I became friendly from there. And your interest in sports media grew, and media in general. And now look at you. You're working WDBO. You're a radio producer. You work how many days a week over at that station?
5, if not 6 days a week. I'm working over there right now. So yeah, now I'm putting in the grind, you know.
And it's awesome because I feel like you have a pretty cool story to tell in that regard as somebody who just like I did. I mean, it's just different timelines. I started listening to sports talk radio a few years after I moved to Orlando in 2003. A lot of national stuff. Loved Colin Cowherd. Don't laugh at me out there. And then some local guys like Jerry Green and Mark Daniels and Jerry O'Neill, the shot doctor, of course. And then just tried to email the right people to figure out how to get in. So when did you make that decision that you were like, no, I'm love listening, still a listener. You never dropped that tag, but right. Where you said, no, I'm going to gun for it. I'm going to go for this.
Yeah. I mean, I moved out here for college in like 2012, I guess. And that was really kind of when I started wanting to be more interested in local sports and things like that as a part of like my listenership, you know what I mean? And that just kind of grew into, I think I really like this. I had a little bit of a journalism background in high school. I was the editor-in-chief of my school newspaper kind of thing. And newspapers went up the wayside. Like when I was graduating high school, that was when they had all the newspapers closed down. Everybody decided, nope, we don't care about print media anymore. And I didn't even think that podcasting and radio broadcasting and things like that could possibly be a part of my future. So just continued on with life and kept that as a back memory. And all of a sudden I just got this itch. I just really wanted to be involved. And this seemed to be the way that I thought I could get involved. And talking with you and talking and listening to the show. And as I grew my involvement and stuff like that, it really like built that fire. And I was like, you know what, I'm going to go for it. I'm finally going to go for it. I had a chance to move back into school, and I went to First Institute out here in Orlando to kind of build my chops on how to run a board and really kind of dive deep into how to make sound good.
Yeah.
You know, it's a lot harder than it sounds. Just because you can make a sound doesn't mean it's any good. So trying to get it to that point
every day.
Exactly. And it's not just about making yourself sound good. I want to figure out how to make people like you and the people I work with at WDBO sound the best they can, so that way our listenership gets that quality. And that was really kind of my background to build into that. And I want to know all that I can in the background to where eventually one day, hopefully, I'm sitting in your seat and I'm interviewing the next guy. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, I invite the opportunity. I'll keep it nice and warm for you. I mean, you're already sort of halfway there. Anybody that ever asks me for my opinion on just getting into sports media, the hardest thing to do is to just get in. And then, well, I shouldn't say that's the second hardest thing to do. It's the first step. The hardest thing to do is stay in, because as you're learning, not exactly a lucrative industry, especially when you get started. There is money to be made. I don't want to paint a dark cloud in an industry that I've been a part of for 15 years. but you got to scrap and claw your way to making a respectable income. And so getting to that point and having to juggle, and you're a dad too on top of it. So makes it that much more difficult. I want to pivot to the station that now I'm obviously not going to highlight the business of the station that you work for. It's a competitor of ours, but
right.
You work for a conservative news station. Is that an accurate detail of what 580 is?
Yeah, I think that would be the basis of our programming. We would like to think that we deliver news style in a very kind of up and down kind of way, but we do offer opinion, and we welcome that opinion, and a lot of it does seem to lean more conservative. Yeah.
And I would say that for obviously cable news gets dragged through the mud for anybody that talks about it.
Sure.
They have their legion of fans, which is why they bring in the ratings that they do. But I will say, even for Fox News, CNN, MSNBC, whatever it is you watch, when there's breaking news, and I think you guys do a good job of this as well, the opinions get put to the side for a moment and you cover the story. And you guys have had a lot of stories to cover, opinion aside. What has it been like over the last couple of weeks to be on the news side? I'm on the sports side, just trying to like pretend like we're all still having fun over here.
Sure.
You're actually in the thick of everything that we've experienced, from the fumbles in a political debate to an assassination attempt to now what we've seen just this past weekend with Biden actually dropping out of the race. I mean, your head must be spinning working for a news station.
Yeah, some of these things are the first time that they've happened in generations. I'm talking, when you're talking about the assassination attempt, that's the first real attempted assassination attempt against a president or presidential candidate since the 80s. Lyndon B. Johnson was the last incumbent to step down and not seek re-election for his spot. So we're seeing some things that haven't happened in generations. It's changing the way that we're looking at the news cycle right now, and it's head spinning. I'm even talking about not just myself, but people that have been in this, that are veterans at delivering this kind of news. They're like, you can't catch a breath. Every day you talk about how it's the dog days of summer for the sports season. We are in the complete opposite right now when it comes to the news cycle. So just trying to keep up with every kind of new breaking information that comes out about it. It seems like there's new details that are being delivered every single day. And you've got to make sure that you get those out to the people. That's the way that we maintain our ratings and listenership. That's the way that we want our listeners to think of us, is if there is breaking news, I want it to come from the people I trust at WDBO. And I think we're doing the best that we can with that right now.
Yeah. And you guys are in the midst of, I don't know if I'd call it the Super Bowl. That's probably coming up in November, but this is definitely the playoffs, is what it feels like right now for you guys. And the stories have been crazy. For somebody that, obviously you listen to sports talk radio, you're a fan of the industry, you're on the news side right now. So you have this sort of interesting perspective of where I have to come from, and folks that host a daily sports talk show, of how you handle that. Because, I joke about burying my head in the sand. I have discussed these things, but
Sure.
You can't get too deep into it. We learned a lot from 2020. It was right. There has to be separation of church and state, sports and politics. What do you think the proper balance is? And there is no right answer to this, but just in your opinion, what the proper balance of stuff like this is going on. We're all living through it as American citizens, yet that's not why people tuned in to hear me or anybody else on that particular day.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's got to be a balance between knowing why your audience is tuning in and why they want to listen to you, but also making sure that you're not cheapening yourself or them. Honestly, you can't look at your audience like they're dumb. Your audience is aware of what's going on in the world, and yeah, sometimes they do want to hear a little bit of what maybe my favorite talking head's opinion is. And again, you got to balance that between having an entire show about it, or here's a quick segment, kind of like your timeout episode last week, which I thought was beautifully delivered. I thought that was exactly a great message and a great comparison to build into that sports story. And you've got to find those mediums and those avenues to get in there with that. And
thank you for that. I appreciate that. I heard Colin Cowherd, his second appearance on this episode already. He mentioned, I heard him say a line that it was so perfect. He said, "You don't turn on Sean Hannity to hear his football picks."
Yeah,
And
exactly.
I never want to go as far as to use the old Laura Ingraham line, "Shut up and dribble."
Sure.
And it's not even that I disagree with the premise of that statement. It's that it's just really crass and rude to put it that way.
Right.
But the general point of that's not why I'm paying attention to what you do for a living.
Sure.
I mean, I certainly think that it applies to us who are in the spoken word industry. I mean, folks like LeBron or anybody that has that much influence, they're just on a different plane because they're kind of operating by their own rules. Taylor Swift,
absolutely.
she can support whoever she wants, and her fans will love her all the same, no matter what. But it is a delicate balance because I know people aren't turning. You're not tuning in to hear. All right, let's hear who Kravitz has coming up next for the Democrats. But
yeah, no, exactly. And the opposite is true. People aren't tuning into WDBO to get a breakdown of how Orlando City's been doing. So it's one of those things.
People aren't tuning in to hear me say that.
So it's about where we can work in sports, because that is still a major sport or major news story in our area, because Orlando is a major league sports area. But you can't just have an entire episode based around sports for your listenership. Again, they tune into you guys for that. They're not coming to us for what our picks for the spread are against in the WNBA All-Star game, you know?
Yeah, I'll try and deliver that the best that I can. So our podcast, this podcast, the Zoneheads podcast, went through a bit of a format change. This podcast feed in general, if I were to trace its lineage, that would be a whole podcast by itself. But
it's lived quite the life, yeah.
It has. It started as the Brandon Kravitz podcast. It then turned to the Zoneheads podcast. It then turned to the Florida Bets podcast. That lasted about 5 episodes. Then a long break to Zoneheads Orlando. And it was something that I truly believed in. And part of the reason is because of the involvement that you had. Shout out to Sean Green and the Loud and Proud Orlando folks in covering all of those different aspects of Orlando sports. But just the business economics of asking people to put out content like that for no return, I felt like wasn't fair. So I decided to get my hands dirty and just do it myself the way that it probably should be done. But you covered the underreported stories in Orlando, and you pumped out some great episodes, which, by the way, those aren't deleted. You can go and check those out. If you're listening to this and you're interested, Greg did some incredible work covering some of the underreported stories in the city of Orlando. Which was your favorite topic to dive into of all the ones that you covered?
Probably my interview with Amari Jones. I think that might have been my favorite because he's an Olympic hopeful, hometown kid, really gets a chance to go and is a favorite to win a gold medal in the Olympics. I think he's got an amazing shot. He's got an amazing story about how his upbringing and graduating at Edgewater and his involvement in our Orlando community. I think he's an amazing kid. I think he's got an amazing shot here coming up, and so somebody to definitely keep an eye on going forward.
I remember one of the takeaways was just how big of a fan he was of, I think specifically the basketball stars, LeBron James, who's going to be carrying the torch.
LeBron. He is
right, and so he gets the chance to do that. That's so cool. I remember that interview was fantastic. The interview that you had with the Valkyries head coach, and learning about that. That's a hidden gem product. Like I knew they existed. I didn't realize the type of support that they had, or someone like her. Her name is lost on me right now. But
head coach Amy Pauley. Yep, she's
a great personality.
Absolutely. And she gave me so much in that interview. She was really, I think that was my first actual interview on the podcast. So I was 100% nervous going into that one. And she was amazing. She gave me more details than what my questions warranted. You know what I mean? And she did a fantastic job. I think the Valkyries are an amazing story going forward, not because it's women's sports, but because it's a new sport that's going to be coming up on the scene that I think is huge internationally, that I think the United States is missing out on. There's a lot of fun that goes into those volleyball events, and it's quick, it's fast. It's, if you like engaging environments like that, it's an amazing experience. So when that comes back around next year, I definitely expect to see some people out there. All
right, Greg's gonna be counting heads at the door, so just be prepared for that.
Looking for all the Zonehead shirts, yeah.
There you go. You know what? Maybe that we can at least help. I'm not saying we're going to draw a large crowd because I got shirts, but I still have some shirts in my box. So maybe we can work something out with the Valkyries. As somebody trying to break in, so I'm going to go back to that part of the conversation as somebody who is you're at the early stages of growing in media. And now right now you're going the news route. Who knows? By the end of it all, you might be well versed. I stepped into the sports world in the beginning. I never got out of it. And sometimes I feel like I've pigeonholed myself too much. So I think you're in a good spot. I'm curious from your perspective, what hurdles you're facing now without getting yourself in any trouble and what you've learned about the business that other people that are listening to this and thinking, okay, I've got somebody that's been in it for 15 years. I've got somebody who's just starting. What's your perspective on the early stages of this process?
I think so much of it is you get out what you put into this. If you are someone that's going to show up, if you're someone that's going to put yourself out there, whether it be talking about new subjects that maybe you're not as well versed on, or even comfortable talking about normally, put whatever topic that might be around, putting yourself out there, letting the people above you know, hey, these are things that I'm willing to try and do. Is there feedback that you're willing to give me? If you're that person, you can get a lot out of this. If you are not that person, you are never going to be that person. They're not going to. You get barely an opportunity as it is. So if you're not going to keep on putting yourself out there and trying to do something new and trying to let people know that you'll do it, you're not going to get there. So I think I've always been someone that's been that way. I mean, you've seen it even just with my interactions with you. Like the first time that I met you was me asking if I could run the fantasy football league, I think, right?
Right. Which by the way, thank you. That's and we got to start that back up again.
Oh yeah,
if you've got the time to do it. But it's that time of year. I gotta find a location. I gotta find somewhere to get us. That's a sidebar. You got me thinking about. I gotta add to the to-do list over here.
Right. So again, putting yourself out there like that, it's the worst somebody's going to tell you is no. The worst somebody's going to say is that doesn't work for us right now. Keep going, keep pushing, keep trying. That's all. That's the big thing that I've taken out of it so far is just keep that attitude up, because once you lose that little bit of an edge, somebody steps right in front of you. So
no, you're 100% right, and that's why I wanted to make sure to say the second hardest part is getting into the business. People can figure that part out.
Yes.
Staying in it and staying active and engaged and motivated, and I see that a lot too over the years is people figure out how to stay in, but staying in and still trying to get ahead, without stomping on people. You want to make sure that you do it in a classy way, but I'm trying to beat everybody that's in front of me, and I would tell them that to their face, and I'll pass them with class. But that's the point that's just the natural competitor in all of us, or what I would hope would be all of us. But I see that far too much. People get into the business and then they sit. If you are getting into media of any kind and you don't have the type of attributes or mindset that Greg is talking about, get a job at Chick-fil-A. And I'm not shaming you if you do.
Wrong with that.
The reason I'm telling you this is get a job. They have better benefits. They'll pay you more per hour.
Yep.
And you're off on Sundays. Okay. Get a job. If you are not a go-getter, get a job at Chick-fil-A and serve sandwiches at the window. You'll be a much happier person.
When the president resigns on a Sunday,
if you have that drive, then go for it.
When the president resigns on a Sunday, you have to go in and open up your laptop and control the radio station when nobody else is there. So
crazy.
Yeah.
you are definitely trial by fire over here. Greg, tell people how they can find all the stuff and the work that you do.
Yeah, no, you can check me out at Rhodes_WDBO if you wanted to see some of my stuff that I'm posting for that website. But you can also check out my personal stuff. I'm starting to revamp my mysportsflorida.com website, and you'll see the My Sports Florida podcast coming out here pretty soon. So
I love it. Greg, always a pleasure catching up. I just felt like we needed to carve out some time to chat, and hopefully you all enjoyed that as much as we did. Thanks so much.
I always appreciate it, man.